Okay, good morning everyone. Hopefully you can see me. I don't know if you can. Um, Maybe let me know. Let me know if you can see me, because something kind of weird is happening with YouTube this morning. I don't really know what it is, but it's yeah. I tried to set up my stream, and then my streaming software wouldn't connect to it, but I couldn't cancel the stream. But then finally I could, and I created another one. But now I'm not really sure if it's working. I don't know. Okay, so Erica, you can see me. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with YouTube, but we have a class, so we figured it out. So, good morning to all of you. I hope you had a nice long weekend. I'm sure you were working on assignments and things like that, and I hope you got a little time, to relax in there as well. Yeah, so we've got only 4 days left. So we will try to wrap this course up in a few days as best we can. We have some religious oppression stuff to discuss and to deal with today. I have some classism stuff to deal with tomorrow. Obviously, we're not doing a very thorough treatment of either of these types of oppression, but we're going to do our best with the time we have left. And we'll have a little time to just sort of summarize things and try to tie things up in a bit of a bow. So good evening, Ivan. Hello to you. Good morning, Karen. Good morning, KC. Good morning, Mashid. Good morning, Justin. Hello to you. Morning, Baha. And Jenna's here. Good morning, Jenna. Erica's here. Hello, Erica. I'm here finally. That's good. Thika's here. Hello, Thika. Erica's here twice. Oh yeah, because she can see me. Hello again, Erica. Caleb's here. Good morning, Caleb. And Casey can see me too. Okay, good. All right, let's get into this. So on Friday, I believe, if I recall, we were talking about religious oppression in Canada, and we were talking specifically about Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And again, it's in the Constitution. The Constitution is the highest law in the land, as it were. And so basically good morning, Manish, all other laws have to conform to the Constitution, right? They have to be in alignment with the Constitution. They can't contradict the Constitution in any way. When you do, you get things that are unconstitutional, right? And so in Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, in the Constitution, it says that people have the freedom of conscience and religion, and the freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, the freedom of peaceful assembly, and the freedom of association, right? But there's a couple of limits on those rights and freedoms. One of them is that they have reasonable limits, right? So you cannot exercise your rights and freedoms in a way that denies the rights and freedoms of others, right? So you getting your rights and freedoms doesn't trump other people's rights and freedoms, right? Everyone has to be able to enjoy them with as little conflict as possible. And we also talked about this notwithstanding clause. And so this is a part of the charter that allows provincial governments to override charter rights in specific instances. And we said that most provinces haven't used the notwithstanding clause. Again, people don't like their rights compromised or taken away from them. So most governments are very careful in sort of using this section of the charter. But, so reasonable limits and the notwithstanding clause. But on Friday, we said Quebec has used the notwithstanding clause many, many times in the past, mostly in an attempt to try to protect its French language and French culture. However, on March 29th of last year, the Quebec Parliament passed a ban on religious symbols, saying that people working for the provincial government or receiving provincial government services could not display religious symbols, right? And so we read an article, I think from the Globe and Mail, called "I Feel Like a Stranger Here Now." And if you remember, that article detailed the experience of 4 or 5 Muslim women living in Quebec, and they sort of explained their feelings and how this new law was affecting them. And I think we said that all of them felt kind of like they had been pushed out, right? That they suddenly didn't belong in their province or in their country, like they were made second-class citizens, like they were, that they were simply being unfairly denied something that everyone else is allowed to have purely because of their religious expression, right? And so we went through these questions and we talked about some of the things that specific women in the article said. And so Bara Arar, of course, said that people who are not affected by the bill, or people who do not identify with those affected, don't understand the immediacy of these politics, right? And so for women like Ms. Arar here, this bill has very clear and significant impacts on her life, right? All of these women are either in the process of educating themselves so they can enter a career, whether it's education or medicine or whatever. Some of these women, like Ms. Farhat here in number 5, she is a lawyer, a law practice. She has a law practice. And so her career will be compromised by this as well. And we said that we said a couple things. We said a couple things here. The first thing we said was that it was important to remember that a bill like this, or a law like this, looks like it affects everyone equally, right? Because it says that if you work for the provincial government or if you receive government services, that you cannot display any religious symbols. And so it looks like it applies to everyone. But of course, you have to think of what religions are present in Canada, in what proportion, and what kind of religious symbols they actually wear. And so if you remember the graph that I showed you on Thursday or Friday, you'll know that roughly 55% of Canadians are Christian, and Christians don't usually wear religious symbols, and if they do, they're not required to. They do it by choice. About 30% of Canadians are atheist or agnostic, so they don't have any strong religious beliefs. And then there are people like Buddhists and Hindus who often don't wear any religious symbols either. And so a law that looks like it applies to everyone actually doesn't, right? There's a very narrow selection of people who are disadvantaged by this law. And again, mostly Muslim women and Sikhs, right? Sikh men who wear turbans. And so these people are in a minoritized group in Canada, both in terms of, sometimes in terms of immigration status, definitely in terms of race, and in terms of religious expression. And of course, the women that we spoke to in the article, or that spoke to us in the article, they're also women. And so some of these people are in minoritized groups and in a number of minoritized groups at the same time. And so these minoritized groups require protection from the majority, but really what they're getting is they're getting discriminated against, right? And they're getting they're being discriminated against in the name of equality and in the name of, you know, the secular state, separating religion and the state. But that's kind of the Quebec government's argument on this. I am not convinced that that's actually what's happening. I think it is Yeah, I think it's an attempt to discriminate against people who are different, whether it's a religious discrimination or a racial discrimination or both. Um, I think that's really what's behind this bill. I don't see it as separating church or state, again, because it simply doesn't affect everyone equally. So there's a small section of the population that are significantly disadvantaged by this, and of course that article showed you just 4 women who are um, struggling now with their education, with their employment prospects, um, if they're employed, with their ability to be promoted, to advance, or simply to feel comfortable and feel like they actually belong in the place that they live. And again, that's maybe not the most tragic part, but one of the most tragic parts of this is that, again, these women don't feel like they belong in their society. And for some of these women, they were born there, right? This is their home. This is the place where they grew up. And suddenly the provincial government has decided that they don't get to have the same rights as everyone else. Right? I wanted to show you something else that makes this this issue of religious expression and discrimination a little more complicated, but I wanted to show it to you anyway. And this case has to do with Trinity Western University. So Trinity Western is a liberal arts university. It's out in Langley, BC. So if you get on the highway and drive for about 40 minutes or 45 minutes east, you will bump into Langley, and you'll find Trinity Western University. And so TWU has a number of programs, and probably about 7 or 8 years ago, Trinity Western created a law school. Now, one of the things you should know about colleges, for you to understand what we're going to talk about, is that colleges, and Columbia College is no exception, colleges need to be accredited, okay? And so basically you can't just open a college and start handing out degrees because you feel like it. That's not how it works. You need to be approved by the government, okay? And so for Columbia College has to go through a very thorough evaluation. And if we pass that evaluation, then the Ministry of Advanced Education will give us the ability to grant degrees, okay? So not just anyone can, type out a piece of paper, a little certificate, and say, here's your degree. The ministry has to approve you first. And it's a long, difficult process to gain accreditation, to be accredited. So here for Trinity Western opened a law school, and they wanted the Law Society of Canada to accredit them, which means that if you went to Trinity Western and you took their law program and you graduated, then having that degree means that you are capable of being a lawyer, and the Law Society of Canada will recognize you as having appropriate training, okay? So again, all schools and programs are like this. They need to be accredited by someone. Otherwise, the degree that you get, the little piece of paper, it means nothing, right? It needs to be approved by government ministries or law societies or some such thing, okay? So Trinity Western opened their law school and gained accreditation from the Law Society of Canada so that their graduates of the law program would actually be seen as lawyers, and the program would be seen as a legitimate law training program, okay? Right, and so, but there was some controversy around that decision, and the controversy, sorry, I'm just going to copy and paste something here. The controversy had to do with a community covenant that Trinity Western students and staff were required to sign. Okay? And so what I'd like you to do is, so in Microsoft Teams, I've just posted links to 2 videos, okay? And so these are kind of the videos are different because the first video takes place early on. So it takes place in about 2013. And takes place in about 2013, and it is one perspective on the issue that we will see, okay? The second video comes later, okay? So it comes in about 2018 when a final decision on this issue is made. And the second video comes from a different perspective, okay? So the 2 videos are different because one is in 2013 and one is in 2018. And they're different because one is coming at it from one perspective, and so they have one view on the issue, and the other video is coming from a different perspective, okay? So what I would like you to do, of course, is watch both of these videos. Watch both of these videos and answer the questions that I have posted, okay? So I'm just going to look here. I just want to check how much time each video is slated for here. So the first one's about 4 minutes, and I think the second one is about 8 or 9. So let me just have a look. I've got to watch the commercial before the video first, as we all do. Right, 8:32. Okay, so that's 12, 13. Okay, so I'm going to give you 17 minutes, as strange as that is. I'm going to give you 17 minutes. Go and watch the 2 videos, answer my questions, and my questions are basically, what is the issue? Okay. Are people's rights and freedoms being violated? And whose rights and how are they being violated? You'll see a demonstration here, and they'll talk, in the first video, they'll talk about there's an important distinction. Okay, so I want you to pay attention. It's right before the video ends, so there's an important distinction to be made. And then in the second video, there's a ruling by the Supreme Court, Canada's Supreme Court. And so I want to know what that ruling is. And then there's a couple of perspectives from 2 guys they talk to, a John Stackhouse and an Earl Phillips. And I want to know how they feel about this ruling, okay? And then, maybe the most interesting question, I'm interested in what you think about this whole thing from a social justice kind of perspective, okay? So I'll give you 17 minutes, and then when we come back, we'll have watched those 2 videos. The questions will be answered, and then and then we'll talk about it. So I'll see you in just 17 minutes. Enjoy the videos, and we'll talk about this kind of complex case. Okay, people, and we're back. So, one issue, two opposing viewpoints. And again, there's a bit of a timeline thing happening. And so maybe I'll just remind you of a few things before we jump into this, okay? What's going on here? Right. So, this is all about this community covenant, okay, that the Trinity Western University has. And so a covenant is kind of a fancy biblical word that's used for an agreement or a deal or a contract. And so in the Bible, if you happen to be Christian or if you happen to have read the Bible, you'll hear of covenants. Various people have covenants with God. The Hebrews have a covenant with God. It's an agreement, right? It's a deal. And so at Trinity Western University, there is a covenant that students and instructors have to sign that bans sexual relationships outside of marriage between a woman and a man. And so obviously no sex between two men or no sex between two women. Other stuff such as hazing and verbal and physical abuse, okay, dishonesty and plagiarism, theft and destruction, no illegal drugs, no consuming alcohol, and no pornography, okay? So people are being asked to sign this covenant, and if you violate it, if you break the agreement, you can get kicked out of Trinity Western. So my question to you then is, what actually is at issue here? And so I'm speaking more to the first video where we saw the protests. What was being protested? What was being protested? Okay, so Casey says, approving law schools that won't allow gay students to be welcome. Okay. How unfair the university is, says Karen. Very true. You gotta give me more than that, Karen. Come on. Gay people banned from law school. Yeah, I think we're close on all of these. So again, the issue here is that in order for the idea here is very similar to the religious symbols ban, is that some people are disproportionately affected. Okay, and so people who are not married, people who are gay or lesbian. Those people are being asked to sign a contract in order to get a law degree, and they are not allowed to do things that everyone else is allowed to do, right? And so if you are going to Trinity Western University and you're a married man or a married woman, well, then it's fine. You can have as much sex as you want, right? But if you are a man and woman who are living together but not married, you are not allowed to have sex anymore, right? So even if you and your partner have been together for 2 years or 3 years, if you go to Trinity Western University, the university is saying, by the way, you are not allowed to have sex with your wife or husband until you're done your law degree. Similarly, if you are gay or lesbian, you are not allowed to have sex with your partner at all, even if you are married, right? So this agreement is basically saying that you're going to, certain people are going to have unreasonable demands placed on them, or you're just not allowed to go to Trinity Western. And again, think about the consequences of this, right? You're paying a lot of money for a law degree, you're pursuing it at Trinity Western, but if you violate one of these rules, and again, the rules only apply to certain people, you can get kicked out, and all of your money might, all your money and effort might, be wasted. So my second question was this: are people's rights and freedoms being violated? And if so, whose and how? Which I think I may have already explained, because sometimes I do that, but tell me anyway. Tell me anyway. Okay, so Casey says LGBTQ rights, so people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, or queer, their rights are being violated. Karen says no one should control one's sexual preference and habits. Okay, and keep in mind, this isn't just on campus, this is off campus, right? So they're not just saying don't have any sex on campus, they're saying even when you go home, or even if you go to another province on spring break or whatever, you're not you are not allowed to have sex with anyone unless they're your wife or your husband, and unless it's a heterosexual marriage, right? So LGBTQ rights and single people, their rights are being violated because they're being told either they can't live their lives however they want, or they're being told that they can't go to Trinity Western University. So there are limits on students' lives, but they have to do with religious beliefs, right? In terms of who can and cannot be married, and if you are married or if you're not married, who can and cannot have sex with one another. And again, this doesn't just apply to university campus, this applies to anywhere, right? In the privacy of your own home. Sorry. And so at the end of the video, they say there's an important distinction here. What is the important distinction? What's the important distinction? They say it kind of right at the end of the video. Of the first video. Boy, you're not going to make me go back and rewatch it, are you? Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I think it's the lawyer at the end of that demonstration, the woman with the glasses. And she, although there's I think a couple women with glasses, but the woman with the longer dark hair, she says there's a difference between discrimination and protection of religious beliefs, right? And so she says you can believe and think and write about and say, within limits, really whatever you want, but you cannot discriminate against other people, right? That's what she's saying the important distinction is here. And so at that point, so again, that video was in 2013 when the school was originally accredited. There was a demonstration going on. Now, in the second video, we jump forward about 5 years. And what happened in those 5 years was a lot of legal challenges, okay? So people challenged Trinity Western's ability to enforce this covenant on people. And it went to BC courts and BC Supreme Courts, and a decision was made, and then it was appealed, and then it spent a long time in court, and it went all the way kind of up the ladder, if you will, till finally it reached the Supreme Court of Canada. And so, like we mentioned, I think on Friday or Thursday, the Supreme Court of Canada is the highest court in Canada. They only hear the cases that they choose to hear. And the Supreme Court is basically the highest authority in Canada. And so when a case comes before them and they make a decision, the decision is final. You can't appeal it, so you can't say, oh, will you look at it again? Once the Supreme Court decides, it's a final decision. And the Supreme Court can compel the government or anyone else to act, right? So they can go to the Canadian government and say, the law you've passed is unconstitutional. You have to change it. You have a year to change it. And so the Supreme Court is, again, the final authority, the final decision-making body. And so whatever they say, that's what goes. And so what did the Supreme Court rule in this case? What did they decide? It was a 7-2 decision, which is a pretty strong majority, right? There are nine judges on the Supreme Court of Canada, and so that's a pretty heavy majority, a 7-2 vote. What did they decide? What did they decide? They voted for that. They voted for what? Free cupcakes for everybody? No. That'd be a 9-0 decision. Everybody should get free cupcakes. But what did they vote for? What was their decision? Not quite. Not quite, but it's kind of you're in the ballpark there, Casey, but not quite there. What did they decide? Okay, I'm going to help you out a little bit. I'm going to help you out. So, here's what the Supreme Court decided. So, this is June 15th, 2018. Supreme Court rules in favor, of law societies. And so, they said that Trinity Western University's community covenant would deter LGBTQ students from attending the law school and that equal access to legal education, diversity in the legal profession, and preventing harm to LGBTQ students was in the public interest. Okay, and so the English version of that decision is that Trinity Western University cannot have this community covenant in a way that discriminates against LGBTQ students, right? LGBTQ students should be allowed to have equal access to a law degree and to education. And so Trinity Western is not allowed to discriminate against them in that way. And again, that's a final decision, right? There's no questioning that, because the Supreme Court is the highest in the land. And so that decision happened, and then there was some reaction. And so this is from the second video. In the second video, as you probably saw or probably understood, was a television program called 100 Huntley Street. It's kind of a religious program, and so it talks about religious issues, Christian issues, and it talks about life and family and society from a Christian perspective. Okay, so it's a Christian show, and so they talked to John Stackhouse. That was the first guy sitting on the couch. And what did he say? What did he have to say about this this Supreme Court decision? What did he have to say about the Supreme Court decision? Mm-hmm. Come on, people. There's 13 of you out there. Okay, so Karen says, okay, so she says John feels that the university should be allowed to keep their customs. Okay. He's definitely critical and not in agreement with the Supreme Court decision, right? He doesn't agree with what the Supreme Court has said, which is unfortunate for him, because again, once the Supreme Court decides, that's kind of it. But he doesn't agree with it, right? And he does feel that people should be allowed to keep their customs. But what else? What else does he say? Because I think he says something about the fact that we live in a multicultural society, and we have to accommodate each other, right? We have to accommodate each other. He talks a little bit about religious freedom, and I think he says something about excuse me, about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms being turned on its head. Yeah, he says some things like that. Let's move on to the guy they talked to on video conference there, Earl Phillips. And Earl, I'm not sure if he still is, but at the time he was kind of the director of Trinity Western University, so he's the head guy. And what did he have to say? What did he have to say? Come on, people. I can wait all day. Okay, let's move on to maybe an easier question. What about this? This is what I'd like to know. So what do you think about this issue? Oops. Okay. So he's concerned about charter rights as well. So this is an answer to the Earl Phillips question. At least I think so. So Casey says he's concerned about the Charter of Rights, right? He's concerned about people's ability to practice their faith, right? He's concerned about people's ability to maintain religious freedom, right? That's what he's expressing. But let's go to this. What's your perspective? What's your perspective on this? So Trinity Western University created a contract, a covenant for everyone to sign that was in alignment with their religious beliefs. There was a challenge to that covenant, and so people felt that the covenant itself discriminated against LGBTQ people. It went all the way through the courts up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, yes, your covenant does discriminate against LGBTQ people, and so you need to do something about that. And Trinity Western does do something about that, which I'll tell you in a second. But what do you think about this? Because there are the rights and freedoms of two different groups are apparently in conflict here, right? We have people's right to freedom of religious belief and expression, but we also have freedom not to be discriminated against on the basis of your sexuality or gender, right? Or religious affiliation. So what's going on here? What do you think? So Karen says this. Karen says, I think you shouldn't force people to practice beliefs or traditions that they do not want. I side with the Supreme Court. Okay. What about other people? What do you think? So Casey says, it's true that the covenant discriminates the rights and freedoms of the students, and it's a good thing that the Supreme Court recognized that the covenant would not benefit anyone. Okay, good. Okay. What else do we think? What else do we think? That's 2 people, so there's still 11 people out there, apparently. Never got a chance to use these sound effects. The streaming software has a bunch of interesting sound effects. I can do this. Or I can do this. I can do this. Oh, that's a good one. I can do this. I probably wouldn't use that. I can do this. That's okay. Hey, Erica answered too. Do that. That was fun. So Erica says, from a social justice perspective, I think the Supreme Court made the right decision. I think this resolution is unfair to everyone of different groups. Okay. And Karen, okay, that's good. That's good, Erica. Karen says the school should update its covenant. There are other things to be committed to. Okay. Yes. So there's an important distinction here to remember, and I will say I'll reveal my own bias here. I'm not very strongly religious, but I think I agree with Karen and with KC and with Erica and with the Supreme Court on this one. I do feel that community covenant discriminated against certain people, and it enforced religious beliefs on those who might not share them. Okay, so I'm just gonna jump to my slides here for a second. Right, so that was the Supreme Court ruling in favor of the law societies, and so about a year ago, almost exactly 2 years ago, the Board of Governors of Trinity Western University voted to make the community covenant optional for current and incoming students. And so the president, and Jimmy agrees with that as well here. Supreme Court did the right thing. Okay. Trinity Western president said in a statement that the change was so that the university could be inclusive of all students wishing to learn from a Christian viewpoint and underlying philosophy. Okay, and so what the important thing to remember here is that there's a difference between there are reasonable limits on people's freedoms, and again, the charter spells out that you cannot discriminate against people. And so you are allowed to hold whatever beliefs you want, and you are able to practice those religious beliefs, but within reasonable limits, right? And those limits are, you cannot violate or infringe upon the rights of other people, and you cannot discriminate against other people either. And so for Christians who want to attend Trinity Western University, they are allowed to practice Christianity, right? They can go to church and pray to God and do all of the things that Christians do. They can choose not to have sex before marriage. They can choose not to engage in homosexual relationships if they so choose. They can choose not to view pornography. They can choose not to consume alcohol or drugs on school property. All of these things, right? But where this covenant steps over the line in terms of Canadian law is that it discriminates against LGBTQ students, right? It makes them have to follow specific rules, right? Sorry, I didn't say that very well. So yeah, you can believe whatever you want, right? But you cannot discriminate against others based on your belief, right? And so another way of looking at this, maybe a more simple version of this story, might be, imagine I own a grocery store, okay? I own a grocery store in Vancouver. But I decide that I am not going to serve any black people in my store. I'll put a sign out front, there's no black people allowed in my store. I don't sell food to black people, okay? So I might have beliefs that motivate me to keep black people out of my store, and I'm allowed to believe those things, right? But I'm not allowed to discriminate against black people, right? I'm not allowed to not serve them in my store. Of course, they could go to any other grocery store in Vancouver, right? There's thousands of grocery stores in Vancouver. They're all over the place. Black people would not go hungry. They have other options, but it doesn't mean that I am allowed to discriminate against them in my store, right? And so, again, people can hold whatever beliefs that they want. They can choose to live their lives in certain ways. And so, again, the Christians at Trinity Western can choose to abstain from sex before marriage and not have any homosexual relationships. but they can't deny other people the right to education on those beliefs, right? So there's a difference between belief and expression and discrimination, right? And so that's what the Supreme Court ruled on, and they said that in fact, you are discriminating against people. And so I think that the people that we saw in the video from 100 Huntley Street were incorrect in their statement that religious freedom wasn't being upheld, because in fact it is, right? Because, like I mentioned, Christians continue to be able to practice their faith. They can still go to Trinity Western University. They can still do all the things, or not do all the things, in the community covenant, and they can actually sign that covenant if they want to, because it's optional. So they're still allowed to do all of those things, right? And so their religious freedom is being upheld. What is being denied is their ability to discriminate against other people on the basis of their beliefs, right? That's what's happening here, and that's why the Supreme Court ruled the way they did. So Christians' religious freedom is not being threatened or violated here. What's being limited is their ability to discriminate on that basis. Okay? So, very quickly. So as of about 2 years ago, the community covenant still exists, but it's optional. So you can sign it if you want, but you don't have to. Okay? So I'll quickly summarize this here. Religious oppression, we've been talking about this for a couple days, is a systematic inequality whereby people or groups are treated differently based on the beliefs they hold about religion. And so sometimes we see this manifested in certain ways. Here we've been looking at certain legal ways in which people's religious beliefs may or may not be compromised. And of course we can have religious oppression and discrimination even within societies where freedom of religion is a constitutional right. So we've said in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms people may not be discriminated against on the basis of their religion, but we should also remember that some people's religious beliefs are more visible than others, right? Some people are more visible to society, and that makes them more vulnerable to religious discrimination, right? And so people who wear hijab or niqab or burqa or turbans, anyone who is sort of displays evidence of their faith is more visible and therefore more subject to discrimination. And so laws like Quebec's law banning religious symbols on the surface looks like it affects everyone equally, but actually does not, right? It disproportionately affects groups that wear religious symbols, and those groups are in minoritized groups in Canada. They're a small number. They don't have a lot of institutional and social power, and so they need extra protection. Again, religious beliefs are protected in Canada, and people are free to believe and worship as their faith dictates, but within reasonable limits. So people's beliefs are protected, but not necessarily their behaviors, right? And so in some cases, like the Trinity Western case that we've seen today, people attempting to exercise their charter rights may come into conflict with others. And so here we have a conflict between the religious freedoms and rights of Christians and the right of LGBTQ people not to be discriminated against and to have equal access to education. And so this applies in this case, but it applies in all cases. One person or group exercising their rights cannot infringe on the rights of others. And so again, people can believe and think and even speak as they wish within limits, right? There's no hate speech allowed, but they cannot deny others rights that are protected in the Charter, regardless of what they may or may not believe. Okay. Whew. So that was a very minor, that was a very shallow treatment of religious oppression. We focused only on 2 cases and we stayed within Canada. Of course, globally speaking, there are all kinds of issues that have to do with religious freedom and religious oppression. We could have talked about, there's so much we could have talked about in this chapter, or in this module, but we've sort of run out of time a little bit, and maybe next time I teach this course, I'll try to expand this a little bit. But I was a little bit worried because sometimes it's a difficult topic to discuss. People often are hold their religious beliefs very deeply and very personally, and so it can be a difficult subject to talk about, and even more so because we're doing it online. So, again, we're just scratching the surface of this. There's lots more to talk about, but I think we touched on a couple of concepts that I think are useful in terms of understanding social justice issues, and particularly where they relate to religious freedom and religious expression. So, that said, I think I'll end it there for today because we've only got a few minutes left. Come back tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit about classism. Again, I'm sorry that we started late. There was I don't know what happened with YouTube, but I managed to sort it out. So I'll see some of you in comparative cultures very shortly. Some of you I'll see tomorrow. So I hope you have a lovely rest of the day, and I'll see you later. Bye.